Good morning, everybody. This is Tom at Talon Guitar Works. It's Saturday morning, and it's a little bit sad out here in the shop today. And the reason is, yesterday afternoon, I had to pick up 3 guitars from my buddy Devin that were all damaged by Helene and Milton, the 2 storms that we had passed through here last month. So there were some flooding issues, there's saltwater intrusion issues, corrosion, delaminations, everything that could happen to the guitars. So I have the guitars here. I went over them very carefully and called Devin with what I thought. And the reason for that is there has to be some ethics involved and a decision-making process on whether or not to fix the guitar. When you first become a luthier or a repair guy or whatever, a tech, you feel like I could do anything, and you have that confidence level. Then experience becomes the best teacher, and you realize that there are some things you shouldn't do or can't do. So I go by the can I and should I approach whenever I have to evaluate a guitar that's severely damaged. And the bottom line with the can I and should I is, do parts and labor exceed the guitar's value at the time? And if the answer is yes, you throw it back to the customer and go, you know, you'd be better off just moving on to another guitar. So I'm going to go over some of the things on these guitars, 2 of them out of the 3, that I can point out to you that have to be done, and it will become self-explanatory. So this is the pick guard off of the loaded pick guard off of the Stratocaster clone that I picked up. And if you notice around all these pole pieces on the pickups, there is rust. Now, I'm not the smart guy, but I have his phone number, and he would be Ken Armstrong. Ken's been doing pickups all his life. His father did pickups, Dan Armstrong, did guitars, everything else. So I'm gonna ask Ken if the saltwater intrusion on these pickups is gonna have a long-term negative effect on the copper coils that the pickups wound with. So I'll have an answer later on this week. Now, most pickups come wax potted from the factory, and I'm wondering if that offered some protection to the pickups, but we're gonna find out. The next thing is these pots are frozen. Now somebody's going to say, get some deoxit or some electronics parts cleaner and it'll be fine. Not with salt water. Salt water, as soon as that solvent in the deoxit or the parts cleaner evaporates, the crystals will reform. They'll interfere with the wiper blades. They've warped the plate on it. It's just easier to replace the pots, the cap, and in this case, also the switch, because the switch was frozen. I had to break it free. So that's where we are with the pick guard alone. Now the tremolo claw and the tremolo springs were all rusted to where they need to be replaced. So now we're going to go to the neck. And it's a maple neck, and it's got a lacquer finish on it. Now that lacquer finish got water underneath it, and a lot of it chipped off. So what I'm going to have to do is brush some lacquer on here, and then once that dries, I'm going to go get a product that I have in the shop called Jet Blush Remover. It's made by a company named Jet, and it's called Blush Remover. It removes the moisture from underneath a lacquer finish or in the lacquer finish. I believe it's actually underneath the finish. So I'm going to do that and see if I could bring that neck back to its original beauty and how that goes. The last part of the guitar is the body. And if you look, you're going to see this big crack right here on the seam running up to where the screw hole is for the neck. There are several more cracks on the front face of the body where it was a multi-laminate body that was glued together. Now the salt is what's causing that. It's causing the finish to lift in areas, and it's causing the seams to separate. Now I know somebody out there is typing right now saying, wait, I use salt when I glue up my wood laminate project so it doesn't slip in the clamps. Yep, you use salt. You don't use salt water, and you don't leave it soak in salt water. That's the difference here. So why salt on a glue joint will help in some cases. Salt water and a capillary effect going into the wood, the water coming back out of the wood, the salt crystals staying with the wood, it's a whole different animal. So this body is going to have to dry out and get down to the correct moisture rate, and I'll use my gun for that before I can determine whether it's going to be repairable or not. Now, the last one I'm going to go over today, because this Acoustic Electric had water in it still, and I don't think it's going to make it, is this Ibanez. Now, the Ibanez has some stuff on it I can't do. I can't do a factory finish fade, and he's got a chip in the headstock. The chips on the back of the guitar body, I can fix those. That's just clear over the mahogany finish. The tremolo springs for the Floyd Rose are going to have to be replaced. The claw I'm going to have to clean the rust off of. There are some ridges along the fretboard neck junction, and I'm hoping that isn't causing the fretboard to delaminate from the neck, and that when it dries out, those ridges are going to be almost imperceptible. Same thing with there's a small ridge on the back of the neck I can feel with my finger. Now I'm hoping that doesn't delaminate. Now I've taken the truss rod cover off because I'm going to have to work this truss rod every day. Otherwise it could rust and freeze in place, and in that case I'd have to remove the whole fretboard to replace the truss rod and put it back on, and that's going to exceed the value of the guitar. The last concern I've got is the two post inserts for the Floyd Rose were just a little bit loose, and I want to make sure that wood didn't swell up getting wet, and that when it dries out that those aren't in there snug. So we're going to see how that goes, and again I'm going to use the moisture gun on it to make sure that it's in the right range before we start any of the repair stuff. So this is Tom at Talon Guitar Works. Remember, only half of my ideas are any good. You got to decide which half.